If you're a naturalized U.S. citizen or you have family who became citizens, there's a new wave of immigration enforcement that you need to understand because the headlines aren't just about visas and the border anymore. This is about something that used to feel almost unthinkable to many people. The government aggressively rechecking old immigration files and expanding denaturalization efforts, meaning attempts to take citizenship away from people who already became Americans. Now, before we go any further, let's be very clear. Denaturalization is not new, and it's not something that can happen casually. The government still has to follow legal procedures and prove specific grounds, most commonly fraud or misrepresentation in the original process. But what's changed going into 2026 is the intensity, the systems, the screening tools, and the volume goals being discussed publicly. And that's why this topic feels different. And the source that I used in this video is from USCIS PM 602-00194, Jan 1, 2026. You can also check after watching the video. So in this video, I'm going to break down what's happening, what's actually changing, why it matters for naturalized citizens, what kinds of issues can trigger scrutiny, and the simple steps you can take right now to protect yourself and your family. Stay with me, because one small mistake from years ago that you barely remember could become a big deal in a new enforcement environment. Let's get into it. The new reality in 2026. More rechecking, more hold and review, more enforcement resources. Here's the first big shift. USCIS is not just processing new applications anymore. We're seeing stronger signals that USCIS will pause, hold, and re-review certain categories of cases, especially tied to expanded high-risk country screening frameworks. A major example is USCIS Policy Memorandum PM 602-0194, dated January 1st, 2026. This memo directs adjudicators to place holds on certain pending benefit requests and, critically, to conduct a comprehensive re-review of approved benefit requests, implicated in Presidential Proclamation 10998, including approvals on or after January 20th, 2021. Source: that is a huge concept, because once the system normalizes re-review, it changes how secure people feel about prior approvals, even if they did everything right. And it's not happening in a vacuum. USCIS also announced a new vetting center on December 5th, 2025, describing it as a centralized unit focused on strengthening screening and targeting bad actors. Source: USCIS Vetting Center Announcement, Dec 5, 2025. So the structure is being built. The review engine is being upgraded. And in 2025, Congress passed and the administration signed a major budget law, widely referred to as the One Big Beautiful Bill, which multiple policy groups describe as injecting roughly $170 billion into immigration enforcement priorities, expanding capacity across detention, border operations, and interior enforcement. Source: NYT Denaturalization Volume Reporting, Dec 17, 2025. More resources, plus more vetting infrastructure, plus more policy authority to recheck cases, more scrutiny in more places. Why naturalized citizens are suddenly in the spotlight. A lot of people believe that once you become a U.S. citizen, you're done. The chapter is closed. But legally, citizenship obtained through naturalization can be challenged if the government proves it was illegally procured or obtained by concealment of a material fact or willful misrepresentation. That's the core. What's fueling fear in 2026 is the public push to expand denaturalization as a policy priority, and reports that the administration wants a dramatically higher monthly pace of cases. The New York Times reported in late 2025 that officials were discussing ramping denaturalization to 100-200 cases per month. Source: USCIS Good Moral Character Policy Memo, AUJ 15, 2025. And NPR has explained the renewed attention on denaturalization and what protections foreign-born Americans have under this process. Source: again, denaturalization is not automatic. It's not something that just happens because an officer doesn't like you. But it is something that becomes more likely to be pursued when enforcement agencies put money, staffing, and leadership pressure behind it. the trigger points that can bring a case back to life. Let's talk about what usually brings denaturalization cases forward. The common thread is something in the original process was false, hidden, or later contradicted. Here are examples of risk areas, spoken in plain English, not legal jargon. First, lying or omitting facts on forms. That includes an old visa application, a green card application, asylum paperwork, or the N-400 citizenship form. Even if the naturalization itself was truthful, problems can arise if earlier benefits were obtained through fraud and that fraud is later discovered. Second, criminal issues, especially if the person did not disclose an arrest, or the government argues the person lacked good moral character during the statutory period, or obtained citizenship when they weren't eligible. Third, identity issues. Different names, different birth dates, different documents across different filings can create a suspicion of misrepresentation, even if there's an innocent explanation. The more aggressive the vetting environment, the less patience systems have for mismatches. Fourth, prior immigration violations that weren't fully disclosed, like prior removal orders, prior misrepresentations at a border crossing, or claims that conflict with later filings. And here's what's new. Even if none of this applies to you, we're seeing expanded screening systems that can pull together data across agencies and time. Data sharing and the enforcement information web. This is where a lot of people feel nervous because modern enforcement isn't only an officer reviewing your paper file. It's databases talking to databases. We've seen reporting and advocacy attention around attempts to expand government information sharing for immigration enforcement. For example, Politico reported February 5, 2026, that a second judge blocked the IRS from sharing taxpayer information with ICE, citing potential privacy violations. Source Politico on judges blocking IRS-ICE sharing, Feb 5, 2026. Separately, public reporting and documentation have discussed the Social Security Administration expanding routine uses, data sharing connected to immigration enforcement frameworks. One place this discussion shows up is in coverage pointing to SSA system of record updates and related commentary around expanded disclosures. Source. And beyond government-to-government sharing, there's also the tech layer. Wired reported that ICE is paying Palantir to build Immigration OS, described as a platform designed to help identify removable non-citizens by pulling data together. Source now. To be fair, a naturalized U.S. citizen is not a removable non-citizen. Deportation doesn't apply the same way. But the bigger message is this: the enforcement environment is becoming more integrated and data-driven, and that can increase the chance that old inconsistencies or allegations get flagged and escalated. The high-risk country framework and why it matters even after citizenship. Another key piece in 2026 is the ripple effect of Presidential Proclamation 10998, which took effect January 1, 2026, restricting and limiting entry and impacting visa issuance for listed nationalities under new screening and security rationales. Source. If you're thinking, that's about visas, not citizens, you're right, on its face. But the USCIS memo we discussed earlier, PM 602-0194, explicitly ties its hold and re-review actions to cases implicated by PP 10998, source wired on Palantir Immigration OS, April 18, 2025. So even though naturalized citizens are not applying for visas, the policy ecosystem is being built around expanded vetting, country-based screening categories, and rechecking benefits. Naturalization itself is getting harder, test changes, and good moral character tightening. While today's video is about naturalized citizens, it's important to understand the pipeline too, because tougher standards upstream create tougher scrutiny downstream. USCIS rolled out the 2025 Naturalization Civics Test, applying to N-400 applications filed on or after October 20th, 2025. USCIS states it's an oral test with 20 questions drawn from a bank of 128, and you must get 12 correct to pass. Source: that alone increases pressure in interviews. And USCIS also issued a policy memo dated August 15, 2025, on restoring a good moral character evaluation standard, describing a holistic assessment including positive contributions that affirmatively demonstrate good moral character. Source. When standards become more subjective, affirmatively demonstrate rather than avoid disqualifying acts, it can create more denials, more referrals, and more review. And yes, USCIS also publicly discussed resuming older-style investigative tactics. In a September 2025 announcement about the naturalization test overhaul, USCIS stated it was resuming neighborhood investigations as part of ensuring statutory requirements are met. Source. All of this signals a mindset shift. Citizenship is being treated less like a finish line and more like a status that must be continuously justified, at least in the way enforcement messaging is being framed. Social media vetting and online presence review expands the net. Even if you never post anything political, you should know this is expanding. The State Department announced expanded screening and vetting for H-1B and H-4 applicants, including online presence review, effective mid-December 2025. And CBP proposed requiring STA applicants to provide social media from the last 5 years, per a Federal Register notice on December 10, 2025. Source. Again, that's not citizenship screening directly, but it shows how normalized digital vetting has become across the immigration system. And in a denaturalization context, any evidence used to argue past misrepresentation, concealed affiliations, or identity inconsistencies can become more discoverable. Travel, what naturalized citizens should know right now. Let's get practical. If you're a naturalized citizen traveling internationally in 2026, you should be aware of expanded biometric programs at ports of entry. CBP has stated that U.S. citizens may opt out of facial biometrics by notifying an officer or airline representative and undergoing an alternative process. And if you experience repeated travel screening problems, extra delays, boarding pass issues, repeated secondary inspections, DHS has a formal redress program called DHS Trip. Now here's the small but important advice that's easy to ignore. If you're a citizen, travel as a citizen. Use a valid U.S. passport. Keep your documents clean and consistent. And if you are asked to prove citizenship quickly, having documentation available matters. The single biggest mistake people make, assuming old paperwork can't hurt them. Many naturalized citizens feel safe because they did the citizenship process years ago and nothing happened. But with re-review frameworks, data integration, and increased denaturalization attention, old issues can surface in new ways. Sometimes it's not even fraud, it's contradiction. For example, imagine someone applied for a benefit long ago and misstated a date, a prior address, or a past marriage. Later, in a different filing, they corrected it or said something different. Alone, that may not matter. But in a high scrutiny environment, inconsistency itself can become a trigger for deeper review. And if the government alleges the inconsistency was deliberate and material, that's when serious problems can start. What you should do now: a calm, realistic safety checklist. Let's end with steps that are not fear-based, just smart. First, do not panic and do not self-incriminate. Watching a video is not legal advice. If you think you have an issue, do not start explaining it on social media or to random people. Second, get your records organized. If you're a naturalized citizen, know where your naturalization certificate is, know where your passport is, and keep secure copies. Third, consistency matters. If you ever have to file anything again, like sponsoring family, be careful that your information matches prior filings. Fourth, avoid scams. In times like this, scammers target immigrants and even citizens with threats like, "Pay now or you'll be deported." USCIS and legitimate agencies do not operate that way. Fifth, if you get contacted by authorities or served papers, talk to a qualified immigration attorney immediately. Denaturalization is rare compared to the total number of naturalized citizens. But it is serious, and you want professional guidance early. Final message. 2026 is becoming a very different year for immigration in America. This is not only about who is entering the country anymore. Now it is also about the government rechecking people who already entered years ago. It's about reopening old files, reviewing past applications, and asking one serious question. Does everything from the past still match today? For many naturalized U.S. citizens who were honest, followed the rules, and completed the process correctly, this may never affect your daily life. But for others, especially seniors who have lived through long immigration journeys, things can be more complicated. Maybe you had an old paperwork mistake. Maybe a name spelling was different years ago. Maybe there was an arrest that was minor but never fully explained. Maybe your timeline was messy, or an immigration lawyer handled something long ago that you don't even remember clearly. And in today's stronger enforcement environment, even small past issues can suddenly feel big. So the smartest thing you can do right now is simple. Stay informed, stay prepared, stay calm. Check your records, keep your documents organized, and never ignore government notices or warnings. And most importantly, if you want clear, simple updates like this, made especially for seniors and families, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments which state are you watching from. Because 2026 is not only about new rules, sometimes the real risk is old files seen through a brand new lens. And in the next video, I'll explain another major immigration change coming soon, so don't miss it. This